Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Visa Franchise. On today's episode, it's really focused on our friends from the British Isles, the UK, helping Brits move to the US. And at Visa Franchise, we can help from the visa aspect. And if you need help, sourcing, investing in a business such as a franchise, all that type of work, and the light accounting work on the US side. But a big part of that is getting your ducks aligned and finalizing, your fiscal situation in the UK, or maintaining it if you plan to continue to have dividends and business interests in the UK. And that's why we brought on our friend Jordan. Jordan's the founder at Horizon UK Tax Solutions. Jordan, Onraet-Wells, thanks for joining today.
No worries. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Patrick. Look forward to discussing the topics around the visa and taxes and how they interline.
And it seems like it's quite timely. We've noticed a huge uptick in interest as well as engaged clients from the UK, whether it's for political reasons, economic reasons, social reasons, or just weather. There's been I've heard many times it was almost like a winter this summer in the UK. So we've had a big uptick in clients as well as interest from the UK. But as we've done for our clients, whether they're coming from Canada or other countries, it's really important to have an advisor like yourself that can help them make the smooth transition and not tie up loose ends from their home country. So maybe Jordan, if you could just give a brief background on yourself and what led you to really focus on helping these expats that are UK nationals or have significant ties to the UK.
Yeah, no, of course. So I guess my background, previously I was at PwC and Deloitte working in global mobility, and I saw a lot of, I'd say, FTSE 100s kind of move around the world in terms of their executive or just simple like employees. And then since then, I worked with an employer of record and saw kind of how that global mobility scale worked. But then a lot of people didn't fit into that top four model. If they weren't just a FTSE 100 company, a lot of entrepreneurs were leaving the UK, or a lot of US companies were coming into the UK. But I said, as recently, a lot of UK entrepreneurs are looking to leave the UK or expand into other markets. And obviously the US is such a good opportunity and market that offers that opportunity for them and their business. So yeah, since a year ago, I've set up on my own around working with high net individuals and entrepreneurs to help them with their tax affairs, either if they're leaving the UK or just expanding into the US market. And I think that's the main 2 points is, do you want to kind of exit from the UK and move your life overseas, or do you want to actually just expand your business into the US and kind of spend your time between the US and the UK? And both cause their own tax implications.
And what we've seen, working alongside your firm and your group is, there's different visa options for different people. And, there's non-immigrant categories like the O1 visa for talented individuals, entrepreneurs, as well as the E2 visa for those making a substantial investment, usually 100K plus. And for those, there's more flexibility in the tax planning side because they're not a green card per se. And then there's other folks that want to go directly over time to U.S. permanent status through like an EB-5 visa or one of the talent categories like EB-1A or EB-2NAW, and that has its own fiscal planning. So we're happy to work alongside Jordan with our in-house immigration attorney as well as the filing attorneys to see what the best plan is and kind of balancing out that U.S. immigration plan together with fiscally optimizing on the UK as well as the US side.
Yeah, and I think from an entrepreneur side, it's also, you kind of want to test that market in the US from a business side. And do you actually want to move there full time, or do you want to spend time between the two countries? And I think that's where the visa and tax becomes a lot more complex for them individuals.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of people getting their feet wet and not having, unless they've already spent significant time in the US, starting with one of these non-immigrant categories that gives more flexibility for them and their family and the fiscal situation. Because once you're an American green card holder and, there's a lot more considerations and ties to the US. And but Jordan, one question for you. What's the biggest tax mistake or a few tax mistakes you see UK-based entrepreneurs make when they're planning that move to the USA?
I think it's the not planning side is the biggest mistake in total, because you can always start testing the waters in that market. But as soon as if you're getting substantial growth in the US and you haven't planned before, you're always going to get that double tax risk. Although you're never going to be double taxed, if you're not planning for it, it can cause a lot of cash flow issues. And I think that's the biggest mistake is if you're earning in the US as a business, like are you setting up in the US? Have you also got a UK company? And then if you're subject to US tax and UK tax at the same time, how are you managing that cash flow position from a company perspective? So there's a lot of work around the treaties between the UK and US, but it's just managing the timing. Obviously, the tax years are different depending on your company year as well. So you've got the personal tax, you've got the company tax. So I think that's the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make is they expand into the market but haven't thought it through from a tax perspective.
So they come to you too late. And are there any, easy wins or, great opportunities with the tax treaty that the UK has with the US? Because a lot of countries don't have a tax treaty. So it makes it a lot harder to, optimize fiscal situations. But are there any really solid benefits to those, especially between the UK and US?
I think that's where it comes in between. Obviously, the UK and the US have a solid tax treaty in place, but it all depends on your circumstance. Like, is it a lot of personal income or is it a lot of corporate income? How are you withdrawing that? In the UK, normally you take a small salary and a large dividend. Does that work for the company? Does it work for what you're trying to achieve in the US? Are you looking to set up in the US long term? Do you want to move to the US as well? So it's that personal and company, and that's what the problem is with the entrepreneurs is it's not just personal, it's corporate and personal.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And obviously it's got to be customized because maybe there's different partners involved. Maybe you have different life ambitions where you're fine. You already are covered, or you don't need to take as much draw from the business, and that capital can kind of accumulate. And choosing, I guess, what jurisdiction would be better between the U.S. and UK for those dividends to be accumulated.
And that's the other thing is entrepreneurs, do you have a partner involved? Is there someone else involved in that business? Or do you have investors that have like a kind of a high importance involved in that business? What do they want to see from the shareholding perspective? Is it better from an investment side? Is it better from a return?
And what type of where are you seeing these entrepreneurs moving from the UK? Is there any preference in terms of states or any benefits when they look at different states to live and or operate their business from?
Yeah, so I mean, again, there's two. You've got the personal tax, you've got the lower states. So obviously you've got the federal tax, but then the income tax. Are you looking to move to like the Florida where there's Texas or Nevada where there's like no income tax? Or are you looking to set up your corporate where it's easier to incorporate and there's lower corporation taxes? So it depends on kind of what you want out of the business. Is it a personal or is it a corporate side?
Could you comment a little bit, Jordan, for those that, maybe they originally moved to the UK, high net worth individuals, but there's been an end of a regime, I believe, the non-resident. Could you just comment a little bit on that update and specifically what those folks should consider?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, actually, because a lot of the non-domiciles have been in the UK for a while. And obviously the new rules have come in and a lot of their overseas income, they can potentially exempt from UK tax, which the rules are now changing that the worldwide income is going to be taxed. So they're looking to relocate to either their home country or look at new opportunities. So if that is the US, they're going to look to go to the US, back to their home country, or expand into the US because it might offer favorable tax situations on their worldwide income. Because before, the non-domicile status had a lot of benefits for these people coming into the UK, but any earnings outside of the UK, as long as they kept them outside of the UK, they wouldn't be subject to UK tax. And also recently is inheritance tax planning has been brought around inheritance tax planning and that domicile and non-domicile. So a lot of people are now going to be considered UK domicile and subject to UK inheritance tax, which is kind of pushing a lot of potential entrepreneurs outside.
What's it like in the UK? Because the US, once you become a green card holder, a US permanent residence, you get an exemption, I think 10 mil, and then your spouse 10 mil. So it's almost 20 mil. So it's a good problem to have. But what's it like in the US, or sorry, the UK, to give perspective on the inheritance tax side?
So in the UK, the old rules kind of, if you're UK domiciled, you're going to be subject to inheritance tax on your worldwide income, and that's around £325,000. So it might not even cover your whole home. So if you're passing that down to like your children, then you'll be
Your
subject
worldwide assets. So you start paying right away, pretty much. Where in the US, there's a big exemption in place,
yeah,
which might not always be there, but as of today, 2024 going into 2025, the US has that.
And that's where a lot of non-domiciles are coming to the UK. And if they're going to be subject on their worldwide assets rather than just their UK assets, it might cause a lot of people to leave the UK. And I mean, since the budget, I've dealt with a lot of people looking to leave the UK. And it's not just UK nationals. It is UK nationals a lot because of the UK tax, but it's non-domicile. And the main reason around that non-domicile is if you've got sincere income outside the UK, but also for inheritance tax to protect their kind of assets they've built up over their years.
And what are some surprises that you see with the UK entrepreneurs starting to do business in the US, whether it's just from a more broad cultural perspective or specific to more of the accounting and tax side?
So it depends on kind of the industry they're in as well, because the opportunities in the US, I mean, depending on what industry you are, the US gives you opportunity in every single market. But if you're looking at like the tech, then what kind of state do you want to live in? Like what kind of market do you want to involve your business in? So it all depends on kind of what their entrepreneur background is and what they're trying to build.
And then for those folks where you have I've talked to so many technology professionals from the UK where they're billing their clients 100K, 200K, 300K plus pounds a year. And for those type of cases, I guess they're worried that they might end up paying more taxes in the US and trying to figure out a way to kind of, minimize their fiscal, fiscal impact. For those type of cases, is it just case by case, or do you see kind of a common thread for those UK technology professionals that might have still some business in the UK, and then they're looking to build a bigger book in the US as they expand and maybe grow a team for the first time?
I think that's where they're looking to kind of where they're trying to go with their business and personal. So on an individual aspect, if you're just a single entrepreneur, then you kind of want to go to the right state with the right corporation tax and income tax and look at their whole business as your own. As you're withdrawing money, you can save the most tax to live in what state. But from the UK, it's a flat. You're going to have the corporation tax. You're going to have the dividend tax on withdrawal from that income. So it just depends on looking them on an individual basis of where you want to base yourself. And also, if you're going to remain resident in the UK by accident, if you need to come back for work, if you need clients, and also if you're trying to build a team, if you still have a team in the UK, you're going to still create a permanent establishment in the UK. So you might not be able to just move your business simply from the UK to the US. You might need a US entity and a UK entity, and then you just need to structure it in the right format that works for you. And is that having that main company in the US, or is it having the main company in the UK? It is case by case scenario, especially for these individuals.
That makes a lot of sense. So based on the headcount, anticipated headcount, where they're going to be living, spending most of the time, visa status. So that makes a lot of sense. Why don't we go? I have more questions for you, Jordan, but why don't we go through some of the questions, and we can start first with David, who's asking, how far in advance should I start planning my taxes before making the move? Is it ever too late?
It's never too late at all. So if you've already made the move, then obviously still you need to plan, because obviously the tax years are different. So from a personal side, the UK is April to April. In the US, it's a calendar year. From a corporate side, it depends if you've got a UK entity. When is your year end? But even if it's 1 or 2 years down the line, it's still, if you're running out from a UK entity and you still don't have a US entity set up, or you have both set up, what is the optimal tax structure for you? It's never too late. Obviously, the earlier before you make that move is the perfect client. But in the real world, that never happens. So it's just, if you continue how you are without making a plan in place, you might not be making that the best tax structure from today.
And I imagine too, it depends on the net worth, assets, income, where, you know, if you have significant income assets, maybe you need ideally 2-3 years ahead of plan. But if you're more starting your career, I'd imagine maybe 6 months would be sufficient to really properly optimize.
And that's the other thing, is how many assets you got. Are you looking to sell the assets, or are you looking to move the assets? So for that, in the business, if you started a UK company, are you subject to UK tax for that capital gains, but are you also then get relief from entrepreneurs relief? But then also, if you sell businesses and sell assets while you're outside of the UK, then you'll not be subject to UK capital gains, but there are anti-avoidance rules around that. So it depends, again, planning from a personal side, and I go back to all the time, is the personal and the corporate side. It's so important to kind of piece that together, especially where you've got other people involved with shareholders or investors.
And then we have Mike Elms who's asking, do you think the 2025 rules around the state tax in the US will change or stay the same under Trump? You know, I think it's going to largely stay the same under Trump, at least for the next 4 years. I believe we have that locked in. From there, you know, your guess is as good as mine. Hopefully it continues. But what do you think, Jordan? Any?
It will be interesting. I think obviously Trump wants the economy to grow in the US, and I think for high net worth individuals going into the US, it won't be a problem. It's more for the individuals trying to just make it to the US before they've got that asset or business involved. How much he can change in it will depend, because obviously the election is going to start rolling out again in 2-3 years for the next term.
And Jordan, can you dumb it down for me, but particularly those Brits that are looking to make the move? Maybe they're an entrepreneur. Like, what are the most common legal companies in the UK, and what's like their US counterpart?
I think that's so in the UK, you're setting up as a limited company most likely, or potentially a partnership. But then in the US, it's what do you want to set up? Do you want to just set up like an LLC? Do you want to set up corporate? And then how are you structuring that? And then also, how are you moving money across? Like, what is the determination between the US income and the UK income? And then also, you've probably got other countries involved. You're not probably working the US, UK market. Are you also looking at Europe or South America or Asia? There's a whole there's a lot more involved than just the UK and the US as well from a tax side.
And then does the UK still have like service taxes? Like if you provide a service in the UK, that the person that receives it has to pay a tax on top of that?
So there's VAT, and obviously you got VAT registration in the UK. So if you've got sales of over 90k a year, for example, then you've got the VAT tax. And that's also determined if you set up in the US, if you've got income in the UK that's still over that threshold, then you're going to be subject to VAT in the UK.
Interesting. I imagine there's some pretty good tax planning there, because in the US, you know, generally if you're providing a service, there's no VAT, but if you're selling like a product online, there is, but it's significantly less than the UK, you know, 5%, 6%.
The biggest thing I was going to say, the biggest thing in the last 10 years is online sales. I mean, online sales have gone through the roof, as in where is that sale made? And it's not as simple as it's just been shipped to this address. Like, where's it been paid for? Where's it going? Like, who's getting this item? It does get a lot more complicated, especially with like royalties as well from online services like YouTube and other factors.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the tax treaties, they deal with that, you know, IP royalties, and I guess that's where it really, you know, it's you digging in together with the entrepreneur and seeing what the most tax efficient strategy is, looking at some of those items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, obviously the UK have tax treaties with over like 130 countries, and they are very similar, but every country do have different rules within that treaty. And I think understanding it to that certain individual is so important, especially when you're going from the UK and the US, because the US have their own tax rules and the UK have their own tax rules, and they're not that similar in the terms of like the residency status and as an individual.
And I guess another question from David, Thanks for clearing it up. Also, if my visa depends on my business being successful, what happens if things don't go as planned? That's really going to largely depend on the visa. So most of our clients go with the E2 visa, which for UK nationals, you need to be residing in the UK, domiciled rather in the UK at the time that you apply for the E2. It's the only passport that has that requirement for the E2 treaty, where you should you should have tight relationships to the UK applying for the E2. But say you're investing 100K in a business, it doesn't go as planned. You can try to renew it in year 5, but the denials that I've seen, it's usually the business isn't making money and there's not US employees, or there's like one person employed. Where we have seen renewals where the business is losing money or barely making money, but there's a big contribution. There's 8 Americans, and the consulate officer knows that if they don't give you the E2 visa, the business is going to close. There's going to be 8 Americans that no longer have jobs. So it's going to depend on the marginality test for the E2 visa. But other categories we've started seeing, with the O1 visa, where we've represented successfully UK entrepreneurs, their entity in the US, and the UK entrepreneur coming over to meet vendors, meet prospective clients. There's greater flexibility depending on the visa category that you apply for, where the E2 is really going to be dependent on the business, and then the O1 is going to be based on your talent and the activities that you're doing in the US. But it's a little more open than the E2 criteria. So everything comes down, David, to what you want to be doing in the US, and we're happy to work together and with our network of attorneys, advise on what the best visa is for you, and then sync with Jordan to make sure that aligns with your fiscal priorities. And then we have Neftali Hernandez. Hey, if I already run a business in the UK, is it better to expand in the US or set up a completely new company there?
So I guess from a tax perspective, it all depends on, are you still looking to keep that UK company running? Is it successful? And kind of, are you still going to have a permanent establishment in the UK? And then also, if you're trying to expand to the US, are you going to personally move to the US or not? Because if you're going to run a US company from the UK, you're going to need a UK entity anyway, because otherwise you're going to be subject to foreign controlled entities. And you're going to create that permanent establishment in the UK. So that's where it's really important to structure it in terms of what you want to do from, as I bring it back again, the personal side and a corporate side.
That's well said. Thanks there. If anybody else has any questions, let me see if we scrolled through. David, any items that we didn't cover yet today that you think are relevant for those UK entrepreneurs, talented professionals looking to move stateside that they should be considering?
Sorry, what was that? As in around the
Jordan, is there anything that we didn't discuss today that these investors, talented individuals should be considering before they make the move stateside?
I think it's more from a tax side is, do you actually want to move your whole business operations, and also where you're looking to employ people? Are you going to control it out of the UK, or are you trying to build a team in the UK? Because there's a lot of difference between trying to run it from the UK and just enter that US market, or move and grow into that US market.
So for example, UK entrepreneur, they don't plan to have anyone in the UK. It's going to be very different than someone that has a 10-person team and continues to employ 10 people in the UK in terms of what they're going to do from a tax planning strategy.
Yeah, so exactly. So if you've already got a team running of 10 in the UK, you're gonna need to keep probably a UK entity open. If you want to then expand into the US, what's the best position for you? Like, if you open a US company, do you then want to hold it still in the UK and have a UK and US company, or do you want to hold it in the US and then have a UK company part of that?
Well, Jordan, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they have additional questions or they want to, talk about their unique situation with you?
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously reach out to my email or on LinkedIn. My website is Horizon UK Tax Solutions. It's Horizon UKTS. So feel free to reach out to any of them, and I'll get back to you. But I think, yeah, the most important thing is plan before. And if you haven't planned or if you've made that move, just make sure you reach out to make sure that you're having your tax structure optimal going forward. Even if you, in the past, you've suffered more tax than you should have. Why continue that? Get it fixed today, basically.
And the penalties can be quite severe. I've seen before, U.S. citizens that spent a lot of time abroad that didn't, do their tax returns, even though, they were a child. The only time they were in the U.S., they were a little child, where they had to pay, I think in one particular case, hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes. And if it probably could have been, significantly less if it was properly planned.
Yeah, and I think that raises 2 points. It's personal side. If you're leaving the UK, make sure you're obliging to the anti-avoidance rules. So you're not leaving the UK, coming back to the UK, and kind of you cover up everything from that aspect. And also your UK property, if you've got housing, that's the biggest downfall is you sell a property in the UK, even if you've lived in it the whole time, but you sell it while resident, there's forms that need to be filed, or if you've rented it out for periods. But then from a corporate side is you might think, oh, you had a business in the UK, you filed everything till you left, and then you just decided to go overseas, not thought about that business obligation, either winding it down, closing down the company, or just making sure you continue to file the corporate and accounts each year.
Well said, Jordan. Well, we included the email in the notes, showed it on the screen. Also, your website, horizonuk.ts.com, and just wanted to appreciate your time today, and looking forward to working together on many more cases for those Brits that want to make the move stateside.
Yeah, no, it's great to speak to you again, obviously, and then hopefully we'll see a lot. Well, I've seen a lot more consider it as well, especially because the recent tax changes in the budget and also the opportunity in the US. I mean, even personally, I've got friends that have moved, even though they're employees, they're not that entrepreneur level. They have moved to the US because of the opportunity there.
And Jordan, definitely, looking forward to doing a live event at sometime in 2025. It'd be great if you could email us if you're interested in meeting in person. It would give a good push for us to set that date. Shoot me an email at patrick@visafranchise.com. Leave in the comment section when you would want me and Jordan, what month you would want us to do an event where you can ask all the questions in person and meet with us as well one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, as we discussed before, I'm excited to kind of have that in person and kind of see everyone that are looking to make that move and plan ahead. And if you've already made that move, obviously, yeah, reach out to us both on email so we can make sure everything's in place for you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jordan.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Cheers.